Hello, happy Monday, happy Career Catalyst Live Day. Um, it is 7 o'clock, so we're about to get started because opportunity don't wait for nobody, and neither do I. All right, so um, this week's topic is one that I kind of talk about a lot of the time, and it's funny that I'm talking about it tonight because I'm in kind of a phase where I'm feeling like, oh, nothing I'm doing is working. I'm not making the impact that I want to be making in my and just the projects that I'm working on, even outside of my business. And it's funny because while I was thinking of what to say to you all, I'm saying it to myself and realizing, oh, I don't have anything to worry about, because when you move from just looking at your job as just a thing you have to do, and you start to look at it as how have you shown up and changed things for somebody, it helps you to, like the title says, come out of the mundane, right? It helps you to mine your job search for gold. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how to go from just doing my job, just going through your job search, um, saying, oh, I only did that because it was my job, and trying to really downplay your experience and your impact, because there are a few reasons people do it. All of them are wrong, but there are a few reasons. So some people try to downplay it because they don't want to have to get specific. They don't want to have to explain, because sometimes getting into the weeds can be intimidating, right? You might not want to have to go into detail about what you fully did, or maybe you're afraid that if you mention what you did, they'll wonder what other people did, and maybe somebody on the project did something different that you find more impactful and more important. And a lot of job seekers do that. I've studied hundreds of jobs. And in many of these cases, I would actually talk to the employee to understand what their job was. And they would say, well, I only do this, but I want to be able to do this, and my manager won't let me. And then they go into this whole spiel about the stuff that they could have, should have, would have been doing. And they didn't understand that I didn't care about any of that. I cared about, like, the fact that, oh, your warehouse has a million items in it and you have to ship them across the state. That's amazing, but people don't think about their jobs that way because they're so used to doing it. And so today is about getting you out of that cycle of ignoring the impact that you have and trying to be like other people in your job search. And so pause and say, I'm Angela M. Zachary. If you don't know, I'm so sorry to hear that, but I'm Angela M. Zachary. I'm the owner of the Inside Track Career Services, and I help job seekers simplify their job searches through insider HR strategies that I've learned over my 16-year career. So what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about first? How are we going to mine the mundane in our job search for that gold, for that sparkly thing that employers want to hear? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to talk about what happened specifically. What happened specifically? And when I say be specific, I am not talking about the STAR method, to be honest with you. I know all of you, if you've been job searching for any amount of time, you probably have heard of the STAR method before. And it's a good way to remember what you want to say. I know a lot of people use it when they're just nervous or when they haven't interviewed very much, because it helps them to remember what's important to say. And so obviously, if you're telling a story, you're going to tell us certain things about the story, right? You're not going to write a book and forget to tell us the setting of the story, are you? No, you're going to tell us where the story happened. And so that's kind of what the STAR method reminds you of. And it's good for interviews when you're asked behavioral questions, but you're not always going to be asked a behavioral question. Or let's take it even broader. Nobody's asking you behavioral questions when you're writing a resume. Nobody's sitting there asking you behavioral questions a lot of the time when you're doing a job application, right? So if you're focusing on just the STAR method to frame your responses or to just have an overall view for your job search, you're going to have gaps because the STAR method answers 4 questions. It doesn't answer any of those things in between, or it doesn't help you give a comprehensive story in your job search. So that's where I'm focusing on, because I don't want you to have just your interview responses down for a few types of interview questions and then be floundering any other time in your job search. It's a comprehensive thing. Your job search requires a resume, maybe a cover letter, LinkedIn profile, the actual job application, the interview, screening calls. There are so many areas of your job search where your STAR method, as good as it might be, you might have honed it and practiced it, but that's not going to answer everything for you. So you have to have an approach that's comprehensive. So when I say what happened specifically, I'm saying what was the problem and what was its impact on the team or the organization, right? So if I say that the problem I solve is studying people's jobs to help them get promotions, right? Well, that's the problem. People don't understand their jobs and therefore they can't get a promotion, and it's impacting them by holding them back in organizations, by making them take jobs they don't actually want or jobs they're not qualified for. On the flip side, it does the same for leaders, helps them to stop hiring people or promoting people who are not ready for the roles. So you want to be clear about the problem and how it is actually impacting the organization. And why I say how it impacts them is because that's what employers care about. They care about impact. They want to hear a situation that aligns with their own, so they can be able to understand immediately how you fit into their framework, how you fit into their lives, basically. So if you're pointing to a story or a situation that directly aligns with what they're asking you for, and you can say, this is how it impacted, and they can hear their history or their problem that they currently have in what you're saying, that's going to help you. That's going to make them listen more closely because you're being specific and you're aligning it with what they want to hear. So then you're going to say, okay, well, what is the solution that I created or how I resolved the problem, right? And that is not, oh, what I did was I talked to the manager and then I wrote something and then it was solved. That is not what I'm talking about, because again, I'm not telling you to answer this for a 2-minute response to an interview question. I'm telling you to say this because you need to be able to pull this information at every step of your job search, right? I want you to have a cache of information about yourself. And let's be honest, a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people go through their jobs never stopping to compile any kind of understanding of what their impact has been. And so when I see people who've been at the same job for 10, 15 years and have to move on, they can't think of their impact because they've just been thinking about it as just the job that they do. And so you got to be able to pull these pieces out so that you can respond to these questions and just approach your job search comprehensively, not just in the places where you use this information, but for yourself, in your own mind. What have I done? What stories can I pull from without having to memorize them through the STAR method? So you're going to say how you solved the problem, how you created something that solved the problem, what it was, if you're able to tell, but also how you came up with the problem, how you knew that it would likely solve the issue. And then you'll share that and write it down. I want you to be writing all these things down so you know. But then you're going to say, okay, so what's the outcome I know? And when I say the outcome I know, I mean that a lot of people and a lot of resume writers too will lie about quantifiable impact, right? Because all those numbers are so important, right? The numbers, you got to have numbers. But when I say use the impact you know, your resume is not the place to lie. Your job interview is not the place to lie. And if those numbers are quantifiable, they are also verifiable. Okay. So I had somebody, I won't even say whether they were a client or not, but they were fabricating numbers on their resume. And I quickly let them go because what we don't want to do is make things up, right? So the impact that you know is important because that's the impact that you can confidently speak on. You'd be amazed how easy it is to tell when somebody's lying about their quantifiable impact. It is. And so the outcome that you know is important. I remember over a decade ago, I believe, I was working a job, and one of the projects that I had to do before I left was to help them design the framework for what I later learned was a job classification system, and that's the structure that employers put their jobs into. I didn't know much about it at the time. I had just taken one class or was still in the class that I had learned about it in, but they asked me to do it. And so I took a couple jobs off the website and just started to define them, figure out what are the common themes in these jobs and how do I define it in a way that is common to all of them and that is clear and that those of us inside the organization and people outside can understand. And so I did that. And then I went and did some rudimentary market analysis. We didn't have access to surveys at this time. But I went and did some market analysis. And so I gave them this report back and said, here are the jobs, here's what they are. This is kind of a basic foundation for a class system. Now, I have no idea what they did with that afterward. I have no clue. I'm not going to then say, and I was the one who created their entire job system, because that wouldn't be true, would it? No, I can say that I did the first fruits of their job classification system. I can say that I modeled that framework based on what I learned in this course that no one else in the organization had. I could say that because that's the impact that I know. So we want to be truthful and we want to be confident in what you actually have. Don't try to make stuff up just because you think it'll be more impressive, because true is impressive, right? Your real impact is impressive. So what's the next question you need to ask yourself to be able to have this comprehensive understanding of the gold inside your job, right? So who or what benefited from what you did and how much? When I say who or what and how much, I'm broadening this spectrum, right? People think that impact has to be dollar amounts. And it doesn't, because we don't all have jobs that relate to dollar amounts. You won't see, if you ever saw my resume, there might be like $2 amounts on there really. And I'm a compensation analyst, right? But not every job requires that type of impact because that's just not what the job is. But when you see people online talking, well, you got to have quantifiers, you got to have numbers. They don't always specify what kind of numbers. And not just numbers. To quantify your impact is not just to put numbers. Quantifying your impact could be the level of leadership that you supported or the level of leadership that you worked with. Those are also impact because an employer is going to care about which types of people you work with. If I am trying to be, I don't know, a CFO, they're going to care that I work with people that are high in leadership. They're gonna care about the types of relationships that I've had to build. And while those are not numbers, those do provide scope to the type of work that you do. If you have regional leadership, for instance, no, that's not a number, but it does tell them how much of the organization that you have control over. And so that's so important to not try to say, I saved my company $1 million, if in fact you did not save your company $1 million. You want to think in terms of what your job is, not what you see people say online, because you don't want to set yourself up to have to explain something and not be able to, right? Other ways you could answer that would be like programs you've helped move forward, how important they were to the company, what they were worth to the company, stuff like that. Even time savings. If you've come up with a process that speeds things up, that's important to share. It's not necessarily, you might not have a number for it, but you can explain those things. in the process. And then the last question I want you to ask that I think a lot of people don't ask enough, maybe for fear of looking arrogant, I don't know, but how might the income have been different if you were not part of it? Such an important question, because if you've ever been in an interview, and I've definitely been in interviews where they've said, why should we pick you over someone else, or what makes you a better candidate? I've even asked this before in interviews. Um, Asking this question of yourself tells you or helps you to kind of understand what your special sauce is, what makes you different. Um, and if you're going to use this as like a story or a problem that you solved, you're going to want to know, would this project have been the same had I not been part of it? And if the answer is no, then let's dive into why. I've done a project recently that was very technical. I'm not technical. I'm a writer. I'm an analyst, but I'm not technical. But the work, the job, the project was very technical. And so where I saw a lot of people not taking the time to learn that technical aspect of the project, I said, okay, wait, I know y'all want to move forward, but let's wait. I'm going to go research. I'm going to go learn. And then what I came back with was an understanding of these technical jobs. And, those subject matter experts were surprised that I went and did that. But that meant you might hate the question, but you'll probably get asked a lot of the time. And this question is going to help you answer. But if I had not been on that project, they would not have had anyone with both the HR knowledge and the technical understanding to be able to guide them through that process. And they would have gotten a product that might have worked for the moment, but it would not have gone past them. And so you have to think about how you make the environment around you different. I don't mean, please don't say, I'm very friendly and I show up on time. I'll be honest with you, nobody cares about that until you don't do it. But what you need to be trying to answer for yourself is, like, what is my subject matter expertise that nobody else had? What is the process or the technique or my special way of doing things that nobody else could do? And there is something, I promise you, there is something. You just have to stop being afraid to look at yourself in the mirror and find it. You just have to look at yourself in the mirror and find that thing. That's so important, especially as you try to find a job, or as you become a job searcher, a job seeker, because if you cannot do that, you will not be able to convince anyone else to do it. That is the honest to God truth. If I cannot say what makes me worth paying for, employers are not going to know either. They're waiting for you to tell them, right? So you've got to figure out, what's my special sauce? Wherever I end up, what do I bring that nobody else can bring? And so when they ask you that stupid question, why should we hire you over somebody else? You don't have to be annoyed. You can just fire off your response, because you've done the research and you understand your experience so well that you can answer that question, dumb as it might be. I've had somebody ask me what my favorite animal was. Very stupid question, but I had an answer already, and it was tied to my special sauce, right? So when we can say, and I see this all the time, we can say, I don't like this about the job market, I don't like that about the job market, but not liking it doesn't make a change. What's a more fruitful approach is, how can I use it where everyone else is saying, I don't want to answer that question. How can I use it to get where I want to go? Right. That's going to get you much farther than the folks on LinkedIn complaining about stuff. You just have to be the one to use it. So yeah, mind your job, your experience, just like you would, just like I would some data, but you've got to be willing to sift through the stuff that doesn't matter. You got to be willing to sift through the things that if you could, you'd throw them away. You forget they happen. You have to be able to sift through that information to find what makes you valuable, to find your gold. Because if you present that dust, that's not what they want to see. They want to see what makes you special, what makes you shine. And I want you to be able to do that without any fear, without any apprehension that you won't have anything to say when the moment comes. So yeah, moving on to the next thing, because I've talked about everything I want to talk about, and I've been on here for a bit longer. I could definitely say more stuff, but I'm going to hop off now. So next Saturday is the next info session that I'll be doing, and I'll be talking about this and frankly all the secret systems in HR that you don't know about on account of the fact that your employer probably hasn't told you, your manager doesn't understand it, and it's just not stuff that's talked about because it's a secret side of HR. In this info session, I'll be unveiling all those areas of HR. It's not confidential, it's just a secret. And you need to know it in order to improve your job search outcomes. So it'll be next Saturday. I'm thinking about doing them every Saturday, but we'll see. So make sure you register. I'll put the link in the chat box so that you can register. And I will see you all next Monday. We'll be back again talking about these strategies to help you simplify your job search and stop stressing so much about it. All right. Have a good night, y'all.